is not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. But like a miniature Buddha, covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
This episode is brought to you by Hack Motion. Hack Motion is a cutting-edge wrist sensor for teaching wrist motion for compressed tour-like shots. I spent some time with these guys down at the show, and I really enjoyed how easy it was to use, and the calibration time was super simple, and especially the biofeedback option that will definitely make for a more effective golf lesson for your students. You can use it with your iPhone, your iPad, and it gives your students the feel to go along with the reel as you teach the proper wrist motion for better club face control, which, as you know, is huge in the teaching game. Used by some of the top coaches in our industry, Hack Motion is a must for serious golf teachers, coaches, or players. Also, when ordering upon checkout, use the promo code GURU, GURU, to receive free shipping, which is a $30 value. For more information and to order, visit their website at hackmotion.com, HACKMOTION.com today. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Golf Guru Show. I am your host, Jason Sutton, aka The Guru, where it is my mission to deconstruct the habits, life lessons, daily rituals, and ideas that you can add to your teaching and self-development toolbox that hopefully can assist you in helping your students or change your life in a positive way. I am so excited to bring you this episode as my guest is one of my teaching idols and someone who has been an incredible influence in my career and my life. Of course, I'm talking about Mr. Martin Hall. I first met Martin years ago at the Golf Magazine Top 100 party that my boss, Dana Rader, had brought me to because she knew that I loved meeting some of these guys and picking their brains, in which, you know, he was so gracious to answer all my questions and give me such great career advice and also teaching advice that I will never forget. But the most important thing he told me at the end of our conversation was, now it's your turn to pass it on. Sound familiar? Well, that's what I'm trying to do now. So when he approached me at this year's Teaching Summit and said that he not only listened to my show, which was a huge honor, but that he enjoyed it, I knew that I had to get him on as a guest, and he graciously agreed. Martin needs no introduction, as he is one of the all-time greats in our industry and continues to share his knowledge as a speaker at our national teaching summits, and he is the 7-year host of the popular show on the Golf Channel, as you know now, The School of Golf. As always, we cover a variety of topics, such as his early influences of all the great people and the great teachers that he's been around, what he has learned, and how he has evolved as a coach throughout his unbelievable career, to some sage advice to young coaches that you don't want to miss. So without further ado, I give you the gracious, talented, and one of the most giving individuals in the world, and I am so thankful to call him my friend and mentor, Mr. Martin Hall. Martin, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for taking the time and coming on.
Well, Jason, it's wonderful for me to see how you have grown as a teacher since the first time we met, which was many years ago in Orlando at those top 100 teacher meetings we'd have around the show. They were great times. But and before we dive into whatever it is I might have to say, I just want to congratulate you on your podcast. It is awesome. I listen to it. I've listened to a lot of the people on it, and it's, for anybody who wants to know more about how to move a golf club back and forth, you're in the right place if you listen to Jason Sutton.
Oh, thank you so much. That is very kind. And yeah, that we talked about that at the Teaching Summit a little bit. The moment that we had the first time we met was pretty cool, and then for it to come full circle and for you to actually listen to something that I'm doing is a great honor, and I really appreciate that. And for you to come on the show is even better. So we're going to have a good time tonight and kind of dive into all that is teaching golf. And let's start with your career, because I think it's always interesting to kind of see where top teachers started. And I know, like many of us, you had aspirations to play, and you played at a fairly high level on the European tour. So take us back to maybe even like your childhood and what you were into, and then bring us along to some of the things you're doing now.
Well, I won't make this too long-winded, but I always wanted to be a soccer player, and we ended up moving from a house in town out into the country, and had there was no one for me to play soccer with, or football as we call it back in England. So I actually knew my father was a member at the golf club, and this is a perfectly true story. My father was left-handed. My mother played golf right-handed. And so one day in the summer holidays, no mother at home, no father at home. What are you going to do, Martin? I know. I'll go and try this golf thing. So I took the clubs. I went to the nearest bus stop. I got on a bus, went 5 miles to Newcastle Golf Club, had no idea of protocol, just went straight to the first tee. I knew where that was because I'd been with my father once, and started slashing my way around. And that's how I started to play golf. I then went home on the bus, and my father came home that night and said, "What did you do today, son?" I said, "I played golf." He said, "You did what?" And so that was how I started playing golf. So then Dad said, "Well, I think we better get you some lessons, son." So I had lessons right at the outset. So that's how I got started. It was always a game I loved. It was never a game I found easy. And I think people who love to teach are probably people who have a very healthy respect for how difficult this game is for most people. An Ernie Els, a Jack Nicklaus, a Phil Mickelson, they don't understand the difficulty of the game in the way that you and I do. Many of the people listening to this podcast, Jay. So I did play on the European Tour. I had my card for 3 years. Didn't really have any distinction. I led one tournament after 9 holes on the European Tour, and mother and father arrived at that very moment. It was at the Belford. I promptly plopped a couple into the water right in front of them. So that was that. But, I had great experiences on the European Tour, and I still think about it fondly. It was a long time ago, but hitting balls right next to Seve when he was starting out, and played a good amount of golf with Ian Woosnam and Sandy Lyle. So those were the people I grew up playing with, and, it was wonderful to see how well they did. As at this time in my life, I actually wonder what turns did they take that made them such good players, and what turns did I take that probably hurt me as a player, but may have ultimately helped me as a teacher, because I'd like to think I have a very healthy respect for just how difficult this game is for most people, whether it's a lady who's just starting to play, who's 60 years of age and never played before, or whether it's like a young pro I was working with this morning. It's a very difficult game that will test you at some point, no doubt.
So what do you think that was? What was some of those? I know you got so many great stories from some of the players you played with, and then now you coach. But what are some of the life lessons that you learned, and sort of how was there a moment? I guess that hitting it in the water was that moment where you said maybe I wasn't quite good enough to play, or was it a time that you had to reflect on to say, well, I'm going to try to give this teaching thing a go?
No. The teaching thing was never on my radar. I'll come back to the question you just had. Yeah. But the teaching thing actually was a result of missing a 4-foot putt on the last hole at qualifying school, and I failed to keep my card by that one shot. So a 4-foot smelly left to righter that I can still see in my mind.
Oh, no.
It slithered away on the low side. A weak putt. But I did not know what I was going to do the next year, and fortunately, the club I'd been a junior at, the golf chairman there said, "Look, we'll help you out, and we need an assistant pro, so come and give some lessons." And I thought, I've got no idea what to teach. And really, my initial journey to teaching was, okay, I'm starting teaching next week. Let me find Golf Digest and Golf Monthly and see what the cover of that magazine article is. And really, that's what I taught for the next month, until the next month's Golf Digest came out.
Oh, my.
That's how I started to teach. I had no idea what I was doing. But I think there's an interesting thing there. In spite of that, I think the fact that I was eager and that I wanted to help, somehow a lot of people got better anyway, in spite of the appalling information I was giving them, which just shows that encouragement matters immensely. It's sure. You and I know this, but some of the listeners would perhaps not know. But and some of the young teachers that I know you've designed this podcast for, a lot of them, people don't care how much you know, but they do know how much you care. And if you're trying to help, people can sense that. So I think that's really important, that people know you're invested. If you're giving golf lessons, you have to be 100% invested in that player in front of you, no matter what standard they are, getting better. And, you know, when I was giving half-hour lessons when I started out, if I could give someone 35 minutes or 40 minutes, if I didn't have someone following, I would always do that. So people knew I was invested. And I've really, you know, I've loved my career of trying to help people. And it's very gratifying that, you know, in my career statement where I have, I've never had a game plan for it. I've never been a big goal setter in that regard. I've had sort of places I'd like to think I would get to, but at the end of the day, I've really done much more than I ever thought I would. But the playing part, back to the playing part, I think one of the things that I didn't understand, and most people do now, but just in case they don't, I was under the impression back, you know, at that time in the late 1970s, the start direction of the ball was because of the path of the club. The only thing wrong with that is it's wrong.
Yes.
And so if your ball is going to the right, like mine was, that was my miss to the right, I thought, well, I must be swinging too much into out. So I tried to swing more left and more left and more left. And of course, I just left the face open and you know, hit the ball miles to the right. And I didn't know that. So I think actually almost having a little bit of knowledge early on was dangerous. Because if I hadn't thought that, if I hadn't read that the ball starts on the path of the swing, I probably might have done something intuitively to close the face, but I was trying to move the path when I should have been fixing the face. So something I believe in to this day is that you fix the face first whenever you possibly can in the golf swing, whether it's the grip or the backswing or the downswing, but
sure.
Face first for me.
So they were writing about that back in those days, right?
Oh, very, very much so. That was the PJ Manual. That was some of the great teachers of that time. And it's not that it's way off, but it's enough off that I took a turn off the road to good golf, and, you know, Sandy Lyle and Nick Faldo and Ian Woosnam got on the super highway to good golf.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Yeah, so I mean, and that's a good segue into, you know, instruction. It's evolved so much over the years, and now that we have, you know, the better information due to launch monitors and technology. I know you're a big proponent of that, but you've been, because I've followed your career, and you've been so creative in like how you get people to change. I think that's always been very interesting to me. Like, where did that come from? Was that at an early age? Do you feel like you got that from your parents, or, and we can also talk about how teaching has changed as we go forward, but the creativity and in what you talked about was basically just the caring and the bedside manner. Where did that come from?
I really don't know where that came from, Jace. You know, I've always liked trying to help people. When I did start teaching, I happened to read something that I thought was really good. I happened to read that, you know, if you're working with people, whatever you're doing, you should treat people the way you would want people to treat your mother. That meant a lot to me. That, you know, I thought, well, you know what, if Mum was going to take a golf lesson somewhere or a tennis lesson or whatever it was, how would I want the pro to teach her, to treat her? So that mattered to me. The creativity part, I think it's always been for me, I've needed to have models to explain it to myself, whether it's a coat hanger or a broom handle or, you know, a bungee cord with an alignment rod around your hips or your shoulders, whatever it might be. And I think I challenged myself with the task of trying to paint a picture of what it would be like that people obviously can't see. I think if you can see it, you might be able to do it. I think feel is really difficult when people say you teach by feel, because I don't know what you feel when you swing a golf club. I know what I feel. I can tell you what other people have told me they feel, but I don't know what you feel when you swing a golf club. But we have a good idea what how the club needs to run into the ball these days. But I've always liked painting pictures, and, you know, Jack Nicklaus calls me Dr. Gadget. He always, every time, says, "Hello, Gadget, how are you?" I'm very well, thank you, Jack. but it's how I like to do it, and a lot of people like it, but it's not for everybody. And it's not that I teach that way all the time. I think rather like you, I try and I always teach to the person who's in front of me.
Sure.
I would even say I don't teach golf. I teach people. I think that you have to be able to read people all the time, and are they listening? Are they taking it in? Are they taking it on board? So, there's what you teach, which is all the the alpha, beta, gamma, the alpha war going on now, which will pass certainly. There's what you teach. I think there's who you teach and how you teach, and for me, the how you teach and the who you teach is very important because we teach people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I actually talked about that yesterday with one of my young assistants. We made that very quote, which that's kind of funny that you bring that up. But what do you think? Because I think, you were very fortunate, as we all were, to have great mentors.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you spent a lot of time with some great coaches, Bob Toski, and talk a little bit, Mr. Flick, which I think I really feel like I missed out on getting to spend more time with that guy. So talk about your mentors and sort of your influences coming up and what you learned from them.
Yeah, well, then you should come down and spend some time with me because I can tell you everything.
I want to.
Well, you should. You have an open invite. Well, again, so I don't know who the majority of your listeners are, but I know a lot of them are teachers and a lot of them are young people in the game. But I would say no matter what age you're at, I would encourage everybody to take action, whatever it may be, because you never know when a small action, what seems such a small action, can have such a massive effect on your golf, on your career. So the one action that I took that made an incredible difference to my life was I'd been teaching about 4 years, didn't have much money, was in England, wanted to know how to teach better. And I picked up a copy of Golf Digest and somehow, and I don't know why, it opened, the magazine opened on classified ads. I never read classified ads. I don't think I've read one since, but in this list of classified ads, there was a small three-line print block that said, Golf School, coming to Turnberry, Scotland, Bob Toski, Jim Flick, Peter Costis, Davis Love. I thought, wow. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to send a letter to Golf Digest in this place called Norwalk, Connecticut, or wherever I thought it was at that point. So I sent a letter to Norwalk, Connecticut, and said, would there be any chance I could come and observe this golf school? I never expected to get a response. 8 days later, I got a response from Andy Nussbaum, and he said, yeah, we'd love to have you there. So I beetled off to Turnberry, Scotland, in my broken-down old minivan, and Bob Toski and Jim Flick and Peter Costis and Chuck Cook couldn't have been nicer, and that absolutely changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my career. So I say to any of the young people, take action, ask, do, take some risks. And, from that meeting, I ended up moving to America in 1985. And, my journey has been, for a lad who grew up in Newcastle under Limestone-on-Trent, my journey has been unbelievable. The people I've met, what I've done, and it's been incredible. But it all started by writing one letter. And these days, maybe it's an email, maybe it's a text, maybe it's an instant message. But, if you want to make something happen in your life, I think you have to take action. I remember talking to Chuck Cook about this one time, Jason. I mean, Chuck's been a great teacher for many years, as you know.
Yes, I love him.
Oh, he's a great guy. Great guy, great teacher, great stories. I mean, everything he does is just 5-star first class. But he said what made a difference to him was when he heard, apparently, Valerie Hogan said to Ben Hogan, you need to realize if it's going to be, it's up to me. That's what Mrs. Hogan said to Ben. And Chuck Cook took that on board. If it's going to be, it's up to me. So I think to any of the teachers, I mean, where, you're in a very good place in your career, but I would tell everybody, stretch, you can do more, you can do better. And what will that be in the next 10 or 15 years? I don't think we really know what that looks like now, but it won't be like it looks like now. It'll be different. So, some people will get there early, the early adapters. So I encourage all my staff, I always have done, I want you to grow.
Yes.
I want you to stand on the shoulders of those that came before you. That's how you can see farther than they did. And that's massively important to me. I think that's one of the reasons I do podcasts like this, to hopefully have that influence on people and encourage people to, take action, have a go. Go for it.
Yeah, you've definitely had that influence on me, because I remember the time we met, and I was probably hammering you with questions the way, the young guys are hammering me with questions now, and you looked at me and said, "That's all well and good, but now you've got to pass on the knowledge."
Yes,
And
you do.
that made a big effect on me, and that's why I do this stuff now, because we got to leave it better than we found it, right?
Absolutely right. That's why we do it.
So talk about Mr. John Jacobs. I know he was a big influence in your life.
John was an amazing man. He was a great player. A lot of people don't know that. He was a two-time Ryder Cup player, Ryder Cup captain, two-time. Great player. I think he won about half a dozen times. Great hitter of the ball. Tremendous hitter of the ball. And very, very bright guy. Things that people wouldn't know about John, because I spent a lot of time working with Ken Bowden. Ken Bowden did all Jack Nicklaus's books, but he also did most of John Jacobs' books. So, I mean, in addition to knowing John, I got to know Ken very, very well. And actually, Ken told me that much of what John Jacobs taught came from the Bobby Jones books, which is kind of interesting about Bobby Jones. Would just watch how the club head was coming into the ball. But John was really great. I mean, he said, John would always say, "Look, I can see him now. Martin, golf is what the ball does. The rest of it is just commentary." And it is. Golf is what the ball does. You can look at players who've got funny looking swings. So some of the guys on television are making a big deal out of this young man, Matthew Wolff. He's a very good player. But it's not like his swing is like we haven't seen before. I've seen that before. I'm sure you've seen that type of swing before. He's very, very good. But John Jacobs wouldn't have changed that swing. George Gankers hasn't changed it, and John Jacobs wouldn't have changed it either. If the ball's behaving on a consistent basis, you've got a golf swing. So, that is still one of my influences, that whenever I'm teaching, I'm always listening to the contact and watching the ball. And people, teachers who say, well, we're not going to take any notice of what the ball does. We're going to work on your swing for a few months. You'll be all right. I just totally do not agree. That is very not helpful. I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, I don't agree either. I heard stories that he used to turn his back and watch people hit, right? And then he would tell people what to do, and his assistant would make changes to the student.
Have you heard the one that happened in Germany?
No.
This is how clever Jacobs was. Jacobs would walk 2 or 3 feet in front of the player to the side, turn the back on them. He would watch the ball flight, and then he would make some suggestions. And he wouldn't even watch the player at all. And sometimes he would say, "Bring the next player up. I'm not even going to look at them." And so I think it was Jim Hardy, actually, sneaky rascal. He brought a player up, and John's watching the ball, and this ball starts a tiny bit left of target and dives violently to the right. Violently, falls out of sky. But John says, "Another one, if you would, please." The ball starts a bit left, dives violently to the right, and there's no divot. And Jacobs, after 2 swings, said, "Hardy, you rascal, you've brought a left-hander up, haven't you?" He absolutely knew that after 2 swings. Isn't that
my gosh.
And the left-hander was hitting a snipe hook. But Jacobs, it would have looked like a slice to a right-hander, but John Jacobs could tell it was a left-hander because of the ball flight and the lack of backspin on the ball. So he was amazing with his ball flight. I think he always said, and I agree with this, he said, the thing we all react to the most is the face of the club at impact. And that has stayed with me, and I try and pass that on to everybody, that, where your swing goes and where your contact goes, we're all reacting to the face of the club at impact and trying to get the club on target, whether you're an 18-handicap or trying to get the ball in the air, whether you're an 18 handicap or whether you're a scratch player. We're all reacting to the face of the club to some degree or another.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We see that every day, especially with the club golfers that we're working with. Regardless if the path and face are moving in a different direction, they're always going to react to that. So we're tweaking it.
They certainly are. And the other thing that I saw very quickly with the combination of John Jacobs and Bob Tosky and Jim Flick is, in addition to being great teachers and caring people, they were great showmen. And I mean that in a very good way. I don't mean in a used car, plaid jacket salesman type way. They were great showmen. and that made them very likable. I think, and I mean this as an enormous compliment. I think Butch Harmon is a fantastic showman.
Sure.
The stories that he tells, the way he carries himself, the jokes he has with the players, the simplicity and the elegance of the message that he delivers to the players. He delivers the package incredibly well, and there's much to learn from that as well. There's the knowledge you have, and then there's the ability to deliver the message in a package that the student can digest easily. I am not a fan of big long words teaching. I don't think Butch uses big long words. I don't think Jim Flick ever used big long words. John Jacobs certainly didn't. And I tell my staff, if you tell it in a way that a 10-year-old cannot understand it, you're probably not teaching the best way you can. I think a 10-year-old should be able to teach it either by demonstration or the exercises or the drills. And I'm not a big fan of using big, long words when you can use small ones.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I've asked a lot of the coaches on this podcast is, and I see where it can go both ways. I think, again, you've got to know your student, right? So you're going to talk to a doctor that understands what flexion extension means, as opposed to somebody that is maybe just getting into the game, right? So you've got to be careful with your language, but I still think that being accurate with the language is important. And I think, and you're evolving just like I am as far as, the information we're learning now about the golf club and the forces and torques and stuff, that probably doesn't come into a golf lesson very often, but it's good information to know. So, kind of leading into more advice for the young coaches out there. I mean, what would you say that path looks like if you had to give advice to a young coach that maybe is just coming out of the PGM program? And these guys are so armed with the information, but I'm really stressing the importance of the EQ, like you said earlier, the empathy, reading body language, understanding what people are dealing with and how they learn. What would that path look like?
Well, it could there could be many paths there, Jason, in my opinion. But in this day and age, where you can get a snippet of any teacher on Snapchat or YouTube, I would still say to young teachers, make it your business to go and spend time physically on the ground, feet on the ground, with Jason Sutton or Martin Hall or Mark Blackburn or whoever it might be, John Sinclair, whoever it might be. Go and watch a good teacher working and see how they control the lessons from start to finish, whether the student thinks they control it or not. If someone's a really good teacher, the teacher's controlling the lesson. I actually, and I say this hopefully to be informative and not anything else, that I think a teacher's job is to entertain, to educate, to motivate. We have to do all of those: to entertain, to educate, to motivate. And I think our certainty always has to be greater than the student's uncertainty. I think that's massive, that we can't show any uncertainty, especially with really good players. I mean, sometimes I'm not sure what way to go, but I'm never, ever going to let a good player know I'm not sure.
That's a great point.
But I would say that you need to get out and watch what good teachers do and see how they do it and see how they control the lesson. So I gave this young lady a lesson. I hadn't taught her before, and she's a good player, AJGA player, and her father came, and I had my right hand man watching me. He's been with me about 2 or 3 years now. And after this young lady had gone, I turned to Mike and I said, "Did you see how I had control of that lesson from start to finish and they didn't know that I had control?" He said, "Yeah, that was quite something." I think for the young teachers, you need to go and see that at work and then think about, what did he just do there? Because there's a lot to know information-wise about how a club moves, but there's at least as much, again, to know about how to take care of people, how to influence people, how to motivate people. And, I think if I do have any gift towards it at all, I think it would be in that area.
Yes. Yeah, I think obviously you're brilliant at that, and I mean that's just experience, though, right? I mean, it's just dealing with a lot of lessons, dealing with a lot of personalities and people. I mean, I always ask the question: is that trainable, or is it something that you just? I mean, to me, I think you just got to pay attention. right? You got to be observant because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. I always tell my guys, don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to give a bad golf lesson, but learn from it and figure out what you do different.
I would agree with that 100%. I think you have to risk things, and sometimes it goes wrong.
Know when to pivot, know when to change directions, right?
Yeah. Reverse engines. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a learning curve. I mean, I'm still learning, and I always intend to be learning. And Jim Flick was always learning. I mean, Toski is still learning. I spoke to him the other day. He's 92, and he's still, still watching it on TV and, agreeing and disagreeing. And it's a fascinating game at every single level. And there's so much we can learn now about all the aspects of the game. I mean, what we know about putting and what we know about pitching, and the work of people like John Graham and James Ridgard and James Friedman and people like that. I mean, it's fantastic, and what we can see on video now that we couldn't see before. And I think sometimes video is very helpful, and sometimes you can overdo the video. I was watching a video this morning of Inbee Park, who's been an incredibly successful player on the LPGA Tour. I mean, just amazingly successful. If someone sent you that video and you didn't know who it was, you would have a laundry list with 40 points on it of things you'd want to change in that swing.
Sure.
But it's not how a swing looks, it's what a swing does to the ball that matters the most.
Yeah,
so I
sure.
think we always have to remember that, and that's sort of what drives me in my teaching. I like to think, what's the simplest thing I can say to get the job done?
Yeah, when kids or my college players send me videos, it drives me nuts when they just send it to me and go, "What do you think?" Right? You gotta train them to say, "All right, where'd the ball go? What are you trying to work on? What do you feel?" I mean, give me some information. It's no different. I mean, you made a good point earlier about watching good teachers and how they structure golf lessons, because it's every lesson can look different but can be successful. There's many forms.
Yeah, and I think you want people going away with a good feeling from a lesson. I think sometimes, and I've seen the best teachers do this, look, we all have lessons where it just all goes wrong. I call them Black Sunday. I've had a few in my time, and it's called Black Sunday from some lady I taught years ago. I had this idea that you should get the right elbow tight into the body on the downswing. I think I just read Harvey Pennick's Magic Move.
Oh, gosh.
And I was determined I was going to get Maxine Ebert to get this right elbow into the side, and she did. And for 1 hour, she hit the ground a foot behind the ball. And I called it Black Sunday because it was awful. But what I did at the end of the lesson was I gave her a hug and said, "Max, I didn't do a very good job at all there, but we'll get them next time." And I just think something like that, which is, it can sound like a throwaway line, but it's not a throwaway line. I mean, everybody needs hope.
Yes.
And I think it's an awful I've said it, but I try not to say it now. It's an awful thing to say to someone, "I don't know what to tell you," because they've got no hope. So you always have to give your students hope. We all need hope. So I think you have to be, if a lesson's not going well, I think you have to be measured in what you say. That's like, whatever I say, I mustn't show doubt, and I have to give them hope, and I've got to motivate them. Even if saying, "You know what, it's going to be okay next week." And look, one of the things I always say to people, which seems to work well, and I'm not sure why, but I always say, "You know what, I've seen this movie. It's a bit sticky in the middle, but it has a good ending." And people always enjoy that.
I love that.
Because people can identify, yeah, this movie's going to have a good ending. Bit mucky in the middle, but it's going to have a good ending. Because we all want to hear that. I mean, who wants to hear, "Well, I've given you my best, you're still garbage, and good luck"? I mean, nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah, that's not going to work. They're not going to come back.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah, that's what I always tell my guys. It's like, I don't care if you're on the other side of the bridge and you're completely wrong. You say it with confidence.
Yeah.
You say it with pride, and then you get them to come back. Because if I don't know the answer, I've got really smart friends that do. We'll figure out how to help this player, and they appreciate that too. I think if you're transparent like that, like you said, hey, we're going to figure it out together, then that means a big deal to people.
Well, I had this young pro with me today, and he said, "What caused that one?" And, he flared one drive out. What caused that? I said, I don't. Chris, I don't think I can tell you exactly what caused that. And I said, look, when you've got a driver problem, to some degree, going for golf lessons is somewhat like going to see a therapist. You work through stuff, and you really do. And I'm not saying you're a nutcase because you've got to go see a therapist, but you work through stuff, and you find out what works, and you find out what doesn't work. And sometimes you say you have to make a U-turn in the middle of it, but I think you have to be sensible. I think, I heard you say on one of the podcasts that I had said this and this influenced you, but I think you have to look at shots in clusters, not in ones.
Yes.
And you fix flaws, not mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Michael Jordan made mistakes. Tom Brady makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. If you're a teacher who tries to fix mistakes, you're going to have a problem. Now, a mistake is something that will happen from time to time. A flaw is there a lot. A flaw is very evident. It's probably evident on video. If it isn't evident on video on one of the launch monitors, it will be evident in a cluster of shots that you hit. So, you look at tendencies, you look at patterns, you don't go after rogue shots. You just accept that's part of the game. Everybody's going to hit bad shots, so we're not going to worry about that one.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think I remember you saying that in your talk that you did at the Teaching Summit several years ago, and that always stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, don't get too picky. Don't try to overanalyze every single shot. Let's dive into it if it becomes a pattern.
Well, that's right. And so I actually got that out of a sports psychology book, the difference between flaws and mistakes. But really, you could peel back and you could go back to Harvey Penick, and Tom Kite would say, what shall I do if I putted badly today? He said, well, if you putted bad today, don't worry. Have another go tomorrow. And if you have one tournament where you putt badly, don't worry about it. If you have two tournaments where you putt badly, don't worry. If you have three tournaments where you putt badly, let's talk.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. You're not rushing to judgment. I also think that for players, you have to work just as hard on their mindset as you do on their golf swing, which I work really hard on. That you just keep, people know this might take some time before I get close to owning it. And that beating yourself up if you have not a good tournament, there's nothing to be gained by beating yourself up. Absolutely nothing. And so I think just learning to underreact rather than overreact to bad shots and bad rounds of golf is something that a teacher can help students learn, and that's a very helpful skill, to underreact to bad shots, to not bottle it all up inside you, because absolutely nothing good comes out of that. Don't panic is what I would say. And I think when I was a player, I'd hit one bad shot, yeah, I would panic and
freak out.
I tell all my young players now, look, whatever you do, don't panic. You might have a better, but just don't panic. Learn to be calm. I think it's a good skill to develop.
Can you remember, with all the information that we've got now coming out, and like I said, it's coming at us pretty fast.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
A lot, and like you said, your old myth of path and face was even wrong. Is there anything you can remember teaching 10, 15 years ago that you don't teach now? That you're like, that was completely wrong, and I'm teaching something different?
I think there are things that we know now that I suspected were not right, and now they're mainstream not right. I mean, the whole idea to me of everything moving at the same rate of rotation, and the whole idea of everything being synchronized, I don't like that idea, because I think everything is sequenced, it's not synchronized. I think you can be, synchronized on the backswing, but sequenced on the downswing. I think that's different. I think the idea that the hands do nothing other than just hold on, I think we now say, oh dear, very wrong. The idea that the left wrist just stays flat through the entirety of the swing, all the research would say it's moving all over the place.
For sure.
So I think those things certainly affected me. I think I understand, because of the sequencing part, I understand what lag is now. I mean, lag isn't a term I use a lot. I look for it, but lag isn't consciously holding an angle on the downswing with tight wrists as long as you can. I mean, it's an angle you can see on video. I don't like people saying, let's work on your impact position. I think that's just stupid, because that's where the club's going its very fastest. It's like, look, if you've got a good camera that can take pictures at 300 or 500 frames a second,
yes.
We look at the moment you hit the ball and compare alignments to other teachers. But if you work on your impact position, you'll be in trouble. That's one of the things John Jacobs taught me that people wouldn't know. And John would say golf is all about impact. It's all about impact. However, this is a direct quote from John Jacobs. If you try and control impact, you will get burned. And people wouldn't know that. He wanted to have a good impact from, if the impact wasn't right, he would correct it either with the grip and the setup, grip, setup, aim, takeaway, maybe something at the top or something at the finish. But it reminded me when I heard you talking to Mark Blackburn, and I really liked it when Mark said, I want my good player to have downswing blackout.
Yeah.
And I would want players to have downswing black. I don't want my good players knowing what's happening from hip height to hip height. It needs to be correct,
yes.
But I don't want them interfering with that, because I think once you start interfering with that, it's like, trying to put toothpaste back in a tube. It's not easy to fix.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself working on a lot of backswings. I mean, I just think it's important. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, and I get the different patterns that can work and all the experience, but I'm telling you, I can change. Yeah, it's just like you got to change a face when you need to change a face, and it's easier to change it in the takeaway in the top than it is to try to get them to do something halfway down, right? I mean, it's just that's what Mark's talking about. It's like get them in a position where they can succeed, where they don't have to think too much. But it was interesting. I remember, I know you got a big TGM background as well. Yeah. And one of your talks, you were talking about pivot lag, and and that was years ago. And I think that's where we've probably both evolved, where we probably screwed up. And you even said this, you're like, I've screwed up a lot of players trying to get them to hold the angle.
Yeah, no, I think what I did is I did a speech for TPI, and I think it was what I used to teach first, I now teach last. Holding what we'd call keeping the radial deviation in the downswing. When video first came out and we got clarity, I'd work really hard on having people hold that angle, the radial part of it, the wrist cock part of it. And that would be one of the last things that I teach now. I would, if I think somebody needs more angle, I'll do it with the body, I'd do it with arm speed. But I would be far more interested in having people get to impact with perhaps a slight amount of lead wrist flexion, a slight bowed wrist, as Ben Hogan would talk about. And I think there's a big difference between holding wrist cock, being radial, and being bowed, which is flexion. And to any of the young teachers, I think you absolutely have to understand the difference between radial and ulnar and flexion and extension.
Yes.
Because they're not interchangeable. I mean, that's one of the things I'm very pleased about, that I think we can largely measure that stuff with a good degree of accuracy now with hack motion or K motion or I have a 12 sensor AMM. They don't make those anymore, but Tyler Farrell was telling me they're working on something that's going to be very similar to that in Canada. It'll be coming out, which would be great. And I mean, anybody who wants to understand what the hands and wrists should do, they just need to just sign up for Tyler Farrell's website, because it's
absolutely
very good.
Yes, no doubt. Yeah, and I know you spent a lot of time with Doc Neal, and I've spent a lot of time with John Sinclair, and those are the guys that I get answers from when I don't understand something, because they know the real. Yeah,
and I think that's where feel is so difficult, Jason. That people say, sometimes the people say, this young pro I had this morning, if he listens to this, he'll know who he is, but maybe he will. But he says, I play by feel, and I'm thinking that actually means you've got no idea what you do.
Yes.
Sometimes they go where you're looking, and sometimes they don't. And I think feel is fickle. Feel doesn't last. I mean, Peter Costas told me years ago, feel is just a measure of where you're coming from. If you were coming from Chicago right now to Florida, Well, last weekend when it was 50 below in Chicago, if you had come to Florida and it was 50 degrees, you would have thought it was scorching hot. Because I live in Florida, I would have thought it was cold. So feel's just an indication of where you're coming from. And I think, I try and say that a lot when I'm teaching. I want you to feel like you might think that you're swinging to right field if I've got an out to in player. Sorry. So I think we have to know feel is fickle, and I think anybody who wants to be a good teacher, you owe it to yourself to understand what Rob Neal and John Sinclair and Tyler Farrell are saying, and lots of other good people in the world of technology, Sasho and
Yes.
The Duffys, and I think you owe it to yourself to look into at least hack motion or K motion and body track. You need to understand all that stuff, but you don't have to use big long words when you teach it. But you need to understand it as a teacher for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Is it then it's up to us as coaches to give that message to the player and help them understand it, right? But we don't have to use those terms all the time, even though I will occasionally if I'm going to use it, and I'm going to make sure they understand that this means what this feels like and what you're doing. And I love Tyler's stuff because I use metaphors all the time, as you do. Motorcycle move, Jackson 5. I mean, me and Robbie, one of my assistants, just went through his beta version of his certification, and I've learned so much from that guy. He's so smart.
Yeah, he's a very clever boy. He certainly is a clever boy. And from the 3D, I know, but he would tell you that he actually doesn't use 3D a lot now. He just
Sure.
learned from it, but he doesn't need to use it now because he knows what it would be. One thing I did want to touch on for the young teachers is one thing that I think is important is you have a system for how do I start a lesson, how do I end a lesson? Because I think you've got to be able to get in and you've got to be able to get out. And the first question I always ask people, once you said, hello, I'm Martin Hall, blah, 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 I always say, why are you, if it's a new lesson, why are you here? How can I help you? And then I shut up and I let them talk. And sometimes it's a few minutes and sometimes it's 10 minutes. But I think you've got to let people, vent. They've got to get it out.
Yes.
And somewhere in there, in that 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere you will lock onto, this is what we're going to work on. This is what he really wants. But you let them have their say. And at the end of the lesson, I always leave 5 minutes at the end of every lesson to sort of, close it all up, like a speech, to close it all up. And I'll say, now, I want you to tell me what we did today. Because oftentimes what you think we did and what I think we did aren't always the same. And it's astonishing what sometimes people come back with. So if you leave just a few minutes at the end of the lesson to ask Mrs. Jones, now, come on, what did we do today, Judith? What did we do? And then again, you shut up and you listen. You say, well, that's not exactly what we did. Let's have another go at that because I want them going away with, a plan, just a couple of things to do. But I need to know what they've got in their head because I think that's how they get better.
No question.
You need to have a plan. I mean, as Haney said, you got to have a plan.
Yeah, it's just, that just goes back to lesson structure, right? You got to have,
Yes,
you got to set a goal. If not, then it's all about you and not about the student, and you're on the wrong foot at the beginning.
Oh, well, so I would tell you this, with my whole career of teaching, it's never been about me and it's always been about them and it always will be.
That's why you're so good.
Well, thank you for that. But I mean, any speeches that I give, I think I've spoken 7 times at the Teaching and Coaching Summit now, which is,
That's amazing.
they've asked me to do that. But it's always about the people out there. It's never about me. It's not about me at all. And I wouldn't want it to be. Because I think you watch the best people, it's not about them at all. One thing I wanted to talk about a little bit as well, if I could, Jace, for the young teachers.
Sure.
My experience on the Golf Channel has been very interesting.
That's funny. That was my segue. I was going to ask you about the Golf Channel. I got some questions. Keep it going.
Well, ask me how that occurred, and I'll tell you how that all occurred. Ask me how it occurred.
That was my first question. Is like, how did it all happen? Because I actually auditioned for that, as a lot of people did. I know we sent videos in, and then I read that you weren't even interested, And that was my big question is like, you weren't interested, but then obviously you were good enough and you're the perfect person for the job. So tell us about that.
So let me tell you how that happened. My wife is in, the other side of the house right now, but this is almost verbatim what happened. So as you will remember, and some might, the Golf Channel got out of instruction in a big way around about 2006, 2007, and just invested in tournaments. And then about 2008, 9, they came back into instruction, and Michael Breeze started doing his show. And 2010, there was an ad in about July or August. We're going to find the next great teacher.
Yes.
And, send in your tapes. And they got thousands of tapes. And I said to my wife, I said, do you think I should, because I'd done a little bit on the Golf Channel before that because of my affiliation with Nicholas Flick. But I said, should I send one in? She said, no. She said, you're too old, you're too fat. I can't wear a 32-inch white belt around your waist, and you'd be wasting your time. It's just big break for golf instructors. That's what she said.
That's great.
So I wasn't going to send anything in. That was the end of that. And one of the people from the Golf Channel, T.J. Hubbard, called me and said, look, you need to send a tape in, Martin, because you're already on the short list because of what you've done before. You're on the radar. Yeah. So I did send one in. And then, however the process worked, I eventually got offered the job, which was, very interesting and absolutely terrifying. And so what I did want to say is, at some point, whether it's you or somebody who's listening to this, you're going to get your opportunities. It may not be in the Golf Channel because things have changed. I know you're with Swing U now, so that's a big thing for you. It's a very big thing for you in your career. And, other opportunities will come from that, I'm sure. But when you stand in front of a camera, there's things that I've learned that are good to do and not good to do. And
yeah, please share those. That once again, you're just answering all the questions that I had. So this is great.
I've got quite a lot to say about that because I'm closing in on my 300th show on the Golf Channel.
Incredible.
It is bloody incredible. It's unbelievable. And it's a challenge. Doing a show almost every week, it's a real challenge. It's far from easy. But I was very nervous when we did the first few shows. And about the 6th or 7th show we did, my producer called me and said, okay, we're going to shoot 2 shows this week, one on Monday, one on Tuesday, and we've got a couple of guests. I said, who are the guests? We've got Tom Watson on Monday and Nick Faldo on Tuesday.
Oh, my.
Oh, my God. And at that point, we live about 2 hours from the Golf Channel. We used to tape a bit later. So we would drive up the morning, Lisa and I would drive up the morning of the show, and then we'd stay overnight and shoot the next show the next day. We'd drive up the morning of the show, and the morning came around, and I was terrified. And so it was time to get up. I did not want to get up. I was like the 7-year-old who didn't want to go to school. It's like, I can't do it. I can't. And she literally had to throw me out of bed. I couldn't do it. I couldn't face it. And then we got about halfway up there. We got to Ehar Junction, and I said, you've got to turn round. I'm going to be sick. I can't do it. And she wouldn't. I would have turned round. Jason, I would have turned round.
I believe it.
And when I got there, I was absolutely terrified. And then one of my boss at the Golf Channel said, look, don't be so nervous. This is easy. Just talk about them and tell them how good they are, and they'll be fine. And sure enough, if you talk about them and tell them how good they are, they love talking about them. And they do a fantastic job, and that's why they're there. So again, that's where you realize it's not about you. It's about them. It's about the guest. So the Golf Channel, I think there's lots of people who would love to have a go at it. I wanted to. If and when anybody gets to have a go at it, they'll find it so much harder than they can imagine. So any given show, let me give you just a snapshot of what's going on.
Yeah, I want to know what the prep looks like and the behind. Give me the behind the curtain.
Well, the prep part is I get the title. My producer gives me the title. I write the show. We have about a 1-hour phone call about what I'd like to do. He completely shreds that and rips that apart. I go back and write it again. We have another argument about it. And then after about 3 phone calls with him, we settle on what we're going to do. Then I go over it with my wife. And she says, well, that's no good, and that's no good, and that's no good. And this is every week. So I'm reminded of Hemingway, the author, when he would say the first draft is always garbage. And you'll find that if you're writing speeches to any of the people who are writing stuff, if you think your first draft is good, you're missing the point. Because your first draft, when you've written it, if you put it away for a day or two and you go back and look at it, you should look at it the next day and think, this is absolute crap. And you should rip that up and start again and maybe just take 2 or 3 points with it.
And you do this every week.
I do it every week.
That's incredible.
So that's how the show gets written. So there's already, when I get there on a Tuesday morning, there's already 10 hours into that show when I get there on Tuesday morning. I get there, probably get in the studio about 7. We then have a production meeting for probably an hour. And then we pick video for the show and we look at graphics. So that's about 4 hours.
Oh, my.
And then we start to tape. So we don't tape for 4 hours. And then we don't actually tape live, but we tape as if it was live. So that's pretty pressurizing. And you don't have all day to do it. I mean, you filmed in front of a camera.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll say on TV, you'll say, move your right hand when you mean your left hand. And it's very easy to sit on your couch and say, oh, he said the wrong hand. It's like, you're going to. If you do this for a living, you're going to say the left foot when you mean the right foot sometimes, hopefully not too often. But as I'm filming, I have an earpiece and I have a director and a producer in my ear all the time, talking all the time, almost all the time to me. And then I have 5 cameras to play off. You wouldn't know that unless you've been in the studio. There's 5 cameras to work off. And I've got the director shouting, camera 1, Martin, camera 1. Turn left, camera 3. We're using the overhead. Think overhead. So as all that's going on, I'm trying to think about what I'm saying to Jason Sutton about how the lead riff should work. And periodically during that rant, my producers chime in saying, you got 15 seconds, wrap it up, finish, 10, 9, 8. And they're counting me down to get out of the segment. Because it's all planned out to the second. When you hit a segment, you've got to be out almost to the second.
Oh, my gosh.
Not to the 10 seconds, to the second. Because they put in something called iNews. It's all planned out to the second before you do it. So it's really, really difficult. And one of the hardest parts is to actually finish the show. To actually finish the show and stop speaking at the very, very end of the show is hard to do. But it is a skill you eventually learn. But, so yesterday, my producer in the last segment, think about this, last one says, I'm going to give you 3 counts. I'm going to give you a count to when you've got to start the drill. I'm going to give you a count to when you've got to stop the drill. And I'm going to give you a count to be off the air. So I've got 3 45-second counts. So I'm hearing 45, 30, 20, 15. And then it goes 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 45, and you're trying to think about what you're saying while all that's going on. And the director's saying, camera 4, camera 3, turn left, take a step to the side. So it's a lot bloody harder than people think, I can tell you.
I can't imagine that. Do you have any stories about just shows that just absolutely went wrong, in your opinion, or the most challenging shows, maybe?
Yeah, the ones where the technology doesn't work, because there's always something going wrong as well, where the launch monitor doesn't work, or the video's not working, or something goes wrong with one of the microphones, or the earpiece drops out, and so I mean, if anybody who's in television is listening to this, they'll say, yeah, get it, understand.
Yeah.
And then I've learned some other things that I would pass on to anybody, and lots of young assistants these days, of course, are standing in front of a cell phone at the back of the range and, taking videos and putting them on Instagram. So there's a couple of things I've learned. Number 1, when you're talking, stand still. Keep your feet still. Keep your feet still, keep your head still. You can move your hands, but keep your feet still, keep your head still. And I learned that by when I was just the first few shows I did, people would say, well, your body language isn't very good. And the producers would say, your body language needs to be better. And I said, well, what do you mean? I don't know, but your body language needs to be better. Like, well, that's not very
Tell me how to fix it.
They don't. So what I actually did, I came home and I just happened to be watching an ad on TV, and it was some young lady talking about a car dealership down here, and I sort of noticed that her hands were moving, and her legs weren't moving, her head wasn't moving. I thought I'm going to watch that again. So I actually turned the volume off and just watched the motion. I thought that's interesting, because if you turn the volume off and just watch the motion, particularly if people who do ads on TV, they're a bit more animated, the levels are up a bit, the action's a bit more. You can watch that. I thought that's interesting, so I copied a bit of that, and the people in the studio said, yes, you're beginning to get the hand of this body language. So then a couple of weeks later I thought, I'm actually going to turn the volume up when I listen to someone doing an ad on TV, and I'm going to close my eyes and listen to how they do it. And if you listen to the best people on TV, it's like listening to a song. The tone goes up, it goes down. They speak slower, they speak softer, they speak quicker. They make a point, and they're not Johnny One Note. They're not monotone. So to anybody standing in front of a camera, I would say this: you need to keep your feet still when appropriate, keep your head still, move your hands all you want. With the volume, make it like a song that has high notes and low notes, and slow tempo and fast tempo, and sometimes really have a loud moment in there to get people's attention. Otherwise, it sounds too boring. And then finally, I would say this with regard to TV or a camera. No matter how outrageous you think you are, you're not even close.
Yeah, that's good.
I've done, as I said, nearly 300 shows now, Jace. And I would say I think only one time have I gone too far over the edge, because I would keep pushing myself.
Sure.
More ridiculous. I'm going to be like a cartoon character and just see how close to the edge you can get. I only think on one time do I think I went too far. So no matter how much you think you change your tone, you don't. And however outrageous you think you are, you're not. And when you think you're really outrageous, you have what they call in TV world, like, yeah, you finally discovered energy. It's like, well, you could have told me that a long time ago. It would have been a lot easier. But those are things that I think are important for anybody who's doing anything in front of a camera.
Yeah.
Or if you're doing clinics in front of your members, see how outrageous you can be. Make a bit of fun of yourself. I think it's, and when you film yourself, you'll never go as far as you think you've gone.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, because as you know, my story working for Dana, and she's one of the greatest presenters I think I've ever seen, and that's a big thing I learned from her was, presentation skills of just whether you're in front of 10 people in a golf school or in front of 100 people or thousands of people in a big talk. That's a skill I think all coaches need to learn how to do, and now they're giving everybody an opportunity on the Golf Channel if you're an academy instructor to get out there. So these guys, they better be on point. Do you ever go back and watch yourself?
No, I don't. I do. I still listen to a lot of I listen to a lot of speakers in the car on the way down to work. I live 40 minutes away from work, about the same distance you do, and I could have moved to work a long time ago, a lot nearer, but I choose not to, because I either listen to something for 40 minutes on the way to work, something motivational, or somebody speaking, and I like listening to their tone. I mean, different types, whether it's John Maxwell or Tony Robbins or Jim Rohn, who I know you've
love it.
Lots of Brian Tracy. I mean, lots of different people.
Yes.
I've to. But I think listening to live speeches on however you devour it these days, just on your phone, will help your presentation skills enormously. Because all these people who've been great motivational speakers, the message they have is important, but how they deliver it is what we should be studying.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so funny you say that. I know that's why we're kindred spirits, I think, because my story. I mean, I used to listen to CDs of Jim Rohn and, Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar and all these guys that, and it wasn't so much the information, but it was how they delivered it, how they structure their speeches. And you don't know how many mental talks that I did when I was at the golf school based on just a Jim Rohn talk, and I just changed the words.
Well, the three, the four ifs that make life worth living. That's one of Jim Rohn's best. It's like the five. I did a clinic at the club the other week. Like, what am I going to do? The four ifs that will help your golf game. It's just fill in the blanks. I mean, the template is there, and they were the world's best. I mean, some of those speakers are fantastic. Brendan Burchard is fantastic. His energy is unbelievable. Don't know if you've listened to him. But anyway, so where I sidetracked myself there was when you said, how often do I watch it? John Maxwell says he only ever listens to his speeches once and then moves on. That's all I do, because I think you could paralyze yourself. I listen to them once and make my mental notes. I don't make written notes about it. And I just have I feel, if I'm not doing the job the way I should be, I will hear about it from my bosses at the Golf Channel.
Yeah, I don't know how you come up with different ideas. I mean, yeah, at some point you think you're just going to run out.
Well, part of that is that, I still teach a lot. I don't need to teach, but I enjoy teaching. I still teach a lot, and I still challenge myself with trying to find a new way to say it, a creative way to say it. I mean, I read a couple of really good books on creativity by a chap called Roger Von Eck. And one of them, one of the questions he asks is, what's another way of saying this, or what's the absolute opposite of this? And just anything that can get you creative thinking is it has to be good for the business we're in to be creative.
No doubt. So I know you're very well read. You've got, I think, a library of over 3,000 to 4,000 books. I think I read on some website, probably more than that. So give the listeners some of your favorites.
Oh, well, this is one part of the house where I've got a lot of books. I mean, I've got all my favorite golf books, from top to bottom. I mean, on the top shelf there, I go, perhaps in the order I learned, I've got all Toski's books, all Flick's books, all John Jacobs' books. I've got Haney's books. I've got Cook's books. I've got Michael Hebron, got Peter Costis. I've got all Jim McLean's books up there. And then I get down to then I've got all David Ledbetter's books. I've got all Jack Nicklaus's books that I like a lot. So, I mean, the golf books go on and on. I've got all the videotapes and from every presentation that's ever been done at the Teaching Summit, and they're still valuable. And then I've got all the books by Jim Rohn and all the tapes, and Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, Phil McGraw, Dr. Phil McGraw. I've got some of his tapes. I think he's a fantastic presenter. Don't watch him on TV.
Right.
But I think he's a fantastic presenter.
Glad you said that.
I'm not watching him on TV. Larry Wingert, I think, is a very amusing presenter. Things to learn from there, even if you don't like what he's talking about. So, it's always fascinated me, the sort of the personal growth part of it, and, trying to be better tomorrow than I am today, and I'm still trying to do it.
Yeah, it's in the landscape's changed so much now, because I got two guys that work for me that don't read a lot, but they're getting the information other ways, and that's okay. The podcast and then the YouTube videos, and it's just the way times have changed, but they're still consuming it at a high rate, which we did when we were younger.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Anything else you want to talk about with the Golf Channel, or you want to hit a few of these rapid fire questions?
Well, I think the thing that's been amazing for me with the Golf Channel is all the guests I've had and all the Golf Channel Academy shows that I've done. To spend time with so many great players. I mean, I've known Tom Watson a long time, but to spend time with Gary Player and Raymond Floyd and Dave Stockton and Annika and Kari Webb and the friendships I've made with them, and being able to pick their brains and keep in touch with them. It's been more than I could have ever imagined, and I'm just happy to share that information with people who want choose to come and who want to come and spend time with me, or any of the young assistants or pros who want to listen to whatever it is I've got to say. And I think coaching. I think my sort of parting statements would be that coaching. Jim Flick would always say this. Coaching is a lot more than just knowing the correct mechanical information to tell someone. That's knowing what's wrong is just the beginning of it. But you said it earlier, Jason. Having a good bedside manner is unbelievably important in the business we're in. We're in the people business.
Absolutely.
So I think, John Wooden's stuff is amazing.
Yes.
Listening to him talk, amazing. And I would just challenge everybody to just keep trying to be better. One chap that's really worth listening to, I don't know if you do, I listen to him every morning, Darren Hardy. Do you listen to him?
No, I'll definitely check him out.
You need to sign up for Darren Daly.
Okay.
Darren, yeah, he should give me a big thank you now because it'll be like
There you go.
Darren Hardy's stuff. You could just go online and find it. It's a free shot, 2 or 3 minute shot every morning, 5 days a week. It's fantastic stuff. It's sort of it's triple espresso caffeine for your attitude.
I love it. So before we get to my final question, which you know is going to be, do you have any like daily habits or anything unusual that you do every day that has to happen for you to have a successful day?
Yes.
Anything you could share?
I'm not sure I should.
I'm looking at your face right now. It tells me that maybe that's not a good thing.
Well, it's a strange thing, really. But a couple of years ago, I had a simulator put in my garage, so the cars are out and the simulator's in, and I just have to hit balls every morning before I go to work. And all I'm going to say is I go to work before 5 o'clock. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you what time I go in the man cave, but I do love hitting balls. I still love fiddling with it and trying different things. So, yeah, we won't go any deeper than that.
I love it. That is awesome. So you've listened to the podcast. You know the billboard question. So what's the message that you want to leave the listeners with that Martin Hall lives by? Which, I mean, I know you've got so many great quotes, but what would be your answer to the billboard question?
I think my answer would be, I'm not what I want to be. I'm not what I'm going to be, but I'm better than I used to be. And that's what I try and that's what I'm going to do every day until they put me in the big divot. I just want to keep trying to get a little bit better every day, whatever it is. Try and learn something every day. So I'm not what I want to be. I'm not what I'm going to be, but I'm better than I used to be.
I love it. You're the best, man. Thank you so much for
welcome.
doing this, and then thank you. I've told you this so many times, but thank you for being such a great role model for myself and for other coaches out there. And thank you for continually pushing the envelope, which I think is so important for the young coaches to see that even though we're doing what we're doing, we've got to continue to get better and continue to be open-minded and continue to evolve. So I can't thank you enough for that.
You're welcome, Jason. I mean, I know that compared to some of the techie discussions you've had, this will be a different podcast for some people, but I hope that a lot of the younger teachers will listen to this and think, yeah, the technical part's really important, but that old fart had some decent things to say, so maybe we should do some of what he said. It could help us. It's all I would say this, and to the young teachers out there, what I've described to you tonight, I have had a full lesson book for 40 years. I've never had an empty lesson book, ever. At any club I've ever been at in any country, I've had a full lesson book, so it's worked for me.
That says a lot. So how can the listeners reach out to you aside from seeing you on the Golf Channel, but give them your contact information, your social media platforms?
They can go to the website at the club at Ibis, which is a club I'm very proud to be at. We've got 3 Nicholas golf courses, and I'm just going to have a brand new teaching studio next December, so looking forward to that. And all the information with my right-hand man is on there, Michael Kohler. You can reach me through him. He's my gatekeeper.
I love it. Thanks so much, my man. You're the best.
Thank you, and keep up the good work. I'm very proud of you. Keep growing, man.
I appreciate it. What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you go. First, big thank you to my friend Martin for coming on the show and sharing some of the things that you can apply to your teaching and your life. So many great stories, so much great advice from, again, a man that has done so much for our industry and somebody that I admire. This interview was definitely a dream come true for me. Make sure you reach out to Martin. He didn't mention, but he is on Twitter at Martin Hall GC, and you can watch him on the Golf Channel on the show The School of Golf on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. So check him out. You can also follow me and reach me on Twitter or Instagram at Golf Guru TV. That's at Golf Guru TV. And also check out my website, golfgurutv.net, where you can find videos, articles, and more information on my teaching and coaching. If you have a question or a comment, you can leave that at my email on the show at golfgurushow@gmail.com, or hit me up on the DM. This show and all episodes of the Golf Guru Show were produced by myself, Jason Sutton. Music is by Zach Mullet, aka Cutta Beats. Leave me an iTunes review or a rating. Let me know how I'm doing. As I always leave you with the infamous Jim Rohn quote, study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much for listening.